So yes, for LAS, I thought that I would be talking a little bit about how we do things in KDE. We do a ton of applications, and I figured that it's good that you folks know what is going on and, well, how could you participate with what we do. A little bit to introduce myself. Oh, that was bullet points look a bit quirky, don't they? Dear Tuxes. Yeah, this is my name, Ares Paul Gonzalez. I am from Barcelona. I am the KDE president right now, but then I've been doing KDE work for good 15 years nowadays. I'm a software developer, both by training and by just doing. I've been organizing the Linux App Summit for the last few days. I am employed by Blue Systems to work on KDE software. A lot of what I talk about and a lot of what I do, it's sponsored by them. And yeah. So a little bit, what is KDE? As KDE, well, we had our 25th birthday anniversary last year. So as you will understand, there's a whole lot of story and a lot of things have changed since the beginning. What started as a desktop environment nowadays is, well, far more than that. Nowadays, KDE, by the way, doesn't stand for anything. It's the 3 letters that are our name, but that's it. Nowadays, KDE is a community of people like, well, like myself, Adrian, Albert, and many of you in here who, well, decide to collaborate with us and work together. We work together on several products, and a lot of them are applications, which is what I'm going to try to talk about today. Then there's been the question in the past about what makes an application product a KDE app, right? Because this is something that we've somewhat changed also over the years. In the beginning, it had to be a very specific stack, and to some extent it still is. But the definition we're going with nowadays is mostly an application that is developed by the KDE community. As a KDE community, we have some technologies that we've been developing and which we use, but it's not a requisite because sometimes you need to use something else, and that's probably fine. As an example, we have this KDE Connect application, for example, that is working on Android and macOS. These are done in the SDKs for the different platforms because it makes sense and because we could, and that's fine. And we haven't had an outrage because of this, right? So it's possible to do things without Qt and KDE frameworks, which would be like our go-to technologies, but yeah, that's the thing. So I said that KDE apps are the applications developed by the KDE application, and well, there's a little bit of an asterisk, which is basically that it's applications that are developed by us, and obviously under the manifesto which we have. Maybe we can take a quick look at it. Well, you can see that it basically has a list of things that it needs to have. It needs to be follow open governance, which is like how we work in KDE. It needs to be free software. It needs to be inclusive. It needs to try to solve problems for people. We have common ownership in KDE, so every KDE project is owned by all of us. And like if you become a KDE developer one day and want to contribute into a project, you get to do that without having to ask for permission. And then we have an end user focus, which is well, something that is very important to us. Like in practice, what we create is things that solve problems for people. It's not well, we don't solve problems, theoretical problems, so to speak. There's a lot of work that we do, like frameworks work, which is obviously not for end users, but it's means to an end. So every framework we have is for an application or for Plasma, etc. Um, and this last point is a lot of the why, right? While KDE has changed a lot over the last 25 years, it still started from somebody who wanted to make, well, Linux a viable platform for, well, at the start, their partner, and now all of our collective partners and friends and family and beyond, right? Like what drives us is to make it possible to use information devices like computers and phones for everyone, by everyone, anywhere, and with free software whenever possible, right? So we need ways to make this easier. If we asked everybody to do everything from scratch, it would be a whole lot of work, especially as technology gets more demanding. Somebody was making the joke for me that some years ago, that at the beginning it was very easy to start doing a desktop environment, right? Like 25 years ago, if you wanted to do a painting app, you did paint clone, like color paint, and then you were the king. Nowadays, you get to do that like in 20 minutes, but then you need to still compete with Photoshop, Inkscape, and all of those, right? So you need to do a lot more to be at the top of the wave. And to be able to do that, we use mainly two technologies, which are Qt and the KDE frameworks that we create. Qt has been around in KDE since our very beginning. And in fact, our founder, he was a Qt employee and started using the technology that they were creating to start creating the first pillars of our KDE house of nowadays, right? It's something that has continued over time. We still use it very heavily, and well, not only we use it, we've been developing it a lot. Many KDE contributors are Qt contributors nowadays, and even approvers. We have even some maintainers in Qt, and I think that it's very important to like remember that Qt is a very inclusive community where we can we'll work together and create free software with. Qt, though, is a very generic framework for creating applications. It has been created for, well, to create apps, but also to create cars UXs and to create coffee machine UXs and everything in between, right? On the other hand, we have specific needs. We care about doing a desktop environment like Plasma is. We care about creating a ton of applications that we, by the way, need to or want to be able to well, create user experiences that are compatible with each other. You don't want to have different components on every application. So the more we can share both designs and code, the better we can create our applications. Also, the faster, because well, sharing is caring, right? Over the last maybe 10 years, there's been a little bit of a schism within Qt and how we create UIs. At the beginning, everything was Qt widgets and just C++. C++, we use it everywhere, but at the very beginning, all of the UIs were created with just C++. And maybe something that were the designer files, but well, that's for another day. You can identify every widgets application very easily by opening it. They have, well, I don't know. Maybe I just have seen so many of them that I can detect them. But well, they generally work very well. In fact, code from 20 years ago wouldn't be super different from the code that Dolphin has nowadays. Obviously, some of the APIs have changed, but in the core, it's all well the same. You specify how everything is organized in C++, and Qt is smart enough to be able to do the styling of everything and placing the things where you asked it to place them. This worked very well for us and for everyone, and actually, like, there's massive tools, well, from KDE and the outside that are using Qt widgets, and well, it's not going anywhere. When Qt was under the hands of Nokia, they started, though, working on a different kind of technology called QML and Qt Quick that was meant to, at that time, work for their mobile devices, and that we've embraced through Kirigami. The big advantage about QML and Qt Quick is that you get to have well, it's easier to do things like animations and make your application adapt to different form factors. Whereas in Qt widgets, while you could still theoretically do it, you would still need to also put a lot more work. I mean, there is a parallel universe where this split didn't happen, and I don't know, we were all still doing things in C++, but this is not the case anyway. Obviously, under the hood, QML and Qt Quick is implemented in C++, so everything is doable. Anyway, QML and Qt Quick, so the difference between Qt Quick and QML, because I realized that I am using them both at the same time. Qt Quick would be the actual framework that is doing the rendering. QML, the L means language, right? So it's like the actual letters that you write into your text editor that will render something. And then Kirigami is the framework we've put on top. So Qt Quick will be very good at rendering an image, a rectangle, to work with your mouse and your keyboard to get events, but this is a bit too raw to create every application on top of that. There are two technologies that they created that help us create our applications. One is the Qt Quick controls, and then Kirigami. Qt Quick controls will help us create buttons and things that look properly integrated in any platform, much like Qt widget does. So one of the advantages of using Qt is that a button will look like a button on Windows and on Linux, depending on what a button is supposed to look like, right? Here we can see Discover, which is using Kirigami. We can see that it's visibly organized a bit different. It has, for example, the concept of sheets on the side that they slide in and out, and we get to do a little bit more of things. As an example, this application, like the very same source code, will be running on Plasma Mobile and on desktop. And while it behaves a little bit different because you have different real estate requirements on both platforms, you still get to do to do a good job on either. So basically, like both for widgets and for Kirigami, we have several frameworks. If you want to use them on your application, we have the Flatpak runtime and the Snapcraft extension that allow us to use it on your application. So if you're creating an application, you can just use them. Using our runtime or extension won't make your application a KDE application. It will make an application that uses our technology, which is perfectly fine. It's all free software and for you to use, and you're more than welcome to do so and to work with us to improve them. Obviously, it doesn't need to follow the manifest or anything like that. Both runtimes, they bring all of Qt and all of the KDE frameworks. Our frameworks are mostly small extensions on Qt that make it more better for different use cases. They're generally as small as possible. We try to move our development as much as possible into Qt so that everybody can benefit from it, and we don't need to get everyone to go out of their way to use our smaller frameworks, but well, some of them are very powerful and useful. And I don't know, if you have a Qt application, I recommend you that you take a look at it and just use them, especially if they save you some work, or like you can leverage just to maintain some aspects of your applications, right? Now, my talk was about how we create applications as KDE, not how do you use KDE's technology to create an application. And as you will imagine, we need to do these kind of things as a community. If you thought I would like to work on the applications that they do or contribute there, I generally think it's a good idea to just look at the wiki and see what you would like to do. Second. When people ask me how should I join the community and work on things, I always have the feeling that now I'm going to be the person working on this new product or this new application. I think that it shouldn't be this way. Like, obviously, you might want to work on a new product, but it doesn't need to be that way. Being able to work on an aspect of another product and working with other people is how you're going to end up being most effective, right? It's easy for it's much easier for a project, for example, to die if it just started than if it has been working for a good decade. And it's often that you feel like I could create an application that does what I really wanted it to do, but if you find something that is almost there and you just change the few things that need changing, you can do what was needed. One big way for us to welcome people to work with us is the VDG, so that is the Visual Design Group. It's called Visual Design Group because it started from people who were mostly visual artists, but that doesn't mean it's just visual. At the moment, they have been doing a lot of usability work that goes far beyond, well, the visual aspect of things, and like they do icons and the styling for both our applications and Plasma and whatever products we do. But also they think about the interaction with the user and how to make their lives better. It's kind of useful for us as developers as well. Like you can decide yourself, do we want this feature or do we not want this feature? But also having somebody who comes from a usability background and from the outside, who doesn't have this very like close relationship with how the code works at some point, it's also useful, right? Because as engineers, as developers, we're often tempted to well, decide on which features should our application have only by what's easy and by how our code is architected, right? But if you have somebody who can, from like their human usable perspective, to say this is a good idea or not, it can help us move in ways that are more beneficial to our users, which is in practice what we're after, right? Another thing that I view as a service within KDE that you need to be a KDE project to leverage as well is localization. It has been something that I've always felt that is somehow magical about joining a community. When I started in KDE, I was working in this application called Algebra. I had it translated to 5 languages, and I was super proud of it because people came to me and said, I want to translate your application, and it's going to be great. When I joined KDE, I didn't get people reaching out to me saying, I want to translate your application, because there already were people working on it. But like it went from these 5 translation to 100 fairly quickly, and without me even noticing or having to worry about it, which is super powerful and interesting in many ways. Something we also offer to our project is both the continuous integration and continuous delivery of their products in different platforms. So when you're working on an application, you need to have this relationship with your users. And in practice, a lot of the users will already be having that relationship with KDE, right? KDE can help you both testing your software, running your tests, and making sure that things start and work, or that they don't regress, and also publish the binaries. We're doing that for several platforms. I'll go into it a little bit closer later. Now, there is a little bit this story about how maybe KDE applications would be only for Plasma. Obviously, or possibly most of KDE developers are using Plasma on their desktop, and if we miss something in our user experience, we will be integrating it in our applications. And if something is already provided by another application or something, we might not be integrating it. But in practice, a lot of our applications end up being used on different platforms, being well, other Linux desktops, but also beyond on Windows and Mac, and maybe Windows and Mac, or Android, yes. So in general, I think that it should be fairly easy to run any of the applications elsewhere. Somebody mentioned the other day about how it's a bit of a problem when you install an application, a KDE application in a non-KDE Linux distro, and then you see that you get flooded with a few hundred or a few tens of dependencies. But in practice, if you looked into it, it's generally like fairly small, like 100K libraries that you're getting, which in the big scheme of things is just small. But well, the fact that distros, unlike Flatpak or Snap, where it was just the two of the one of them, they split it into like tons of packages. It makes us feel like we're being flooded somehow. So yeah, I invite everyone to participate and join the Getting Started wiki. I added this twice. We have a ton of documentation if you're interested in participating. The first one is the human guidelines, human interaction guidelines. This is more on the usability and design side. The latter is the APIs that we're adding on top of Qt. I think that you can find good resources there. Also, as I said, you don't need to be a KDE project to use any of these, and especially the libraries we have, they can be very useful for Qt projects. So if you're using one, I think that you should consider it. Shortening our distance with our users has been one of the things that we've been discussing the most over the last few years. And it's in big part what we're talking about here. Historically, we've been just creating tarbles for distros to package, tarbles being like these files that just have a ton of source code in them. This is not very useful for anyone who isn't a packager, and what it has shown, right, like this story of, I have a friend who I want to test my application, the application I've been working on, well, was historically a problem. Like, I wouldn't want to give even a university friend, right, a tarball and tell them, just build it, you can do that, right? At the moment, as KDE, we're providing a lot of binaries that you can just use on your systems that, well, that do exactly that, right? We have, on Flatpak, for example, we have many of the applications on FlatUp. We also have nightly builds of many projects. So if you want to use or you want to tell somebody to use this stable application, you can tell them to use the FlatHub one. If you want to show the feature you've been working on to somebody or something like that, you can tell them to use the nightlies, and that's going to be just fine. Also, they can just remove it or get back to the other version, and that's great too. Similarly, from snaps have been built with KDE Neon's binaries, and they also basically get you to the application in Snap-enabled devices. So yeah, if you're on one of those, that's the way to go. Android and Windows, I think that they are very important platforms, not because, well, the platform itself is very interesting, but because of how many people are using them. Telling somebody, use our technology to reach all of the, for example, Plasma mobile users we have nowadays. I mean, it's a good thing, and it's something we need to do, but also being able to tell people either that, or you can have billions of possible users is also useful. Getting back to the asking somebody to test your application, I could never tell one of my friends test my application unless I change them into using Linux on their phone, which is, well, quite the leap. But if I can tell them just install that on your Android phone, that's a little bit easier. And in general, like, most of the things should just work, and it helps a lot. A good example would be Itinerary from Volker there. If you haven't looked at the app, it's quite amazing, and you can already enjoy it, right? Windows as well. We've seen, for example, how Krita has super exploded in the world. I don't think that it would have been even possible to have such a good free software solution if it wasn't because it's well exposed to the massive market of Microsoft Windows. On a slightly different perspective, there's also KDE Neon, which, well, besides also distributing the apps, it's also distributing Plasma. You can install it on your laptop and or your computer, and you can see, well, more or less the vision of how KDE thinks that you could be using your devices. It always ships our latest version. Well, they have several branches, much like we were talking about Flatpak. They have the latest table for everything, or they also have Git builds both for stable branches and for master branches. Now, to the future a little bit. We've been working a lot on getting on top of Qt 6. It's being hard work for a lot of our contributors, and we're getting there hopefully soon. There's several technical advantages that we will be able to leverage as soon as we're on there. There's some limitations still. We need to make sure it works. We don't want to have a troublesome transition, but I am quite hopeful that we will get there soon. The fact that we've been adopting Wayland on the desktop level as well, it also, I think, can help, well, both KDE and all of us as a community to offer a more compelling story about how good our desktops, our Linux desktops can be. And yeah, now if you have some questions, I think we still have quite a few minutes of questions.
Yeah, there is a question.
Thanks. I was curious if there had to be any new innovation or consideration made for the Steamdeck, since KDE has a nice Plasma desktop there. If you had to do any changes, or maybe not. Maybe everything's just amazing there. Any future plans to improve that, or any call for, like, if you want to write a new, you know, Flatpak and put it on your Steamdeck, you know.
So there are no big technical differences on the Steamdeck, especially at an app level. The biggest, maybe obvious difference is that the controls are slightly different. Like, you have the controls and the buttons are different. You don't get to rely on, I don't know, having a tab button or something like that. We could see into mapping the buttons into, like, keyboard buttons, which is kind of what we've been doing so far. We've been doing a lot of development, for example, on making certain parts of our UX usable with the arrows, for example, which is what the cross-digital thing is. It translates into. These are things that we've been doing. I think that it's maybe a little bit obvious, but then it has been I would say necessary. The fact that they have a touchscreen, for example, helped a lot. Helped us leverage a lot of the work we did, for example, for Plasma Mobile, and yeah, that has worked great. There are definitely some concepts that we could be using even more from there, but then I think that there's also the question of how people are going to end up using the Plasma modes on there, if what our users end up wanting is to actually like hook it up into a keyboard and a mouse or not, right? Like for example, we did some tests in a company sprint on like having the Plasma mobile UX on it instead of the Plasma desktop one, and like there were some things that are actually like more comfortable to do, right? Like it's more designed for your fingers and less designed for having a mouse, which effectively the desktop one is. I think that we will see over time. At the moment, though, we've been focused a lot on getting the Wayland experience top-notch. I think that it's what is going to make the biggest leap forward. What I showed yesterday was still on X11. Yeah. There's
All right, another question. Here and then.
I'm very excited about the Plasma Mobile and the Plasma Big Screen projects, but at the moment it doesn't seem that can be used. I mean, and there is a Plasma Neon release, very old, where I can run Plasma Mobile on a tablet, on a x86 tablet, but there's no way to run Plasma big screen without compiling it and installing. Are there a timeline when one can expect to use this technology?
Well, first, I am almost legally obligated to say patches welcome. But yeah, you're right. There's work to be done there. There's been a small switch in how the maintainer of the big screen, for example, has been working, and well, actually in practice on Plasma Mobile as well, where used to be more based on KDE Neon, and now the Manjaro team has been helping us working on the builds for the actual devices. So looking at Manjaro for those two platforms would be a good way for you. From a deployment perspective, both Plasma Mobile and Plasma Big Screen, they are just the same kind of Plasma that the rest of Plasma is, right? So any distro could package those packages and install it. And I'm pretty sure, like, for example, on Big Screen, you could go into like a normal KDE Neon thing, go apt install Plasma Big Screen, and then do your TV thing. Obviously, Manjaro will probably have thought a little bit more about the integration of the services that you need to start, like, for example, to be able to use your TV remote to use the thing, or they do weird things with, cool things with Mycroft, the voice integration system. So that's where we're working. On also Big Screen, the transition into Wayland, I think that it's going to be quite interesting because it allows us to have a little bit more of control over how we interact with the generally low-powered graphics cards that these systems kind of have. But it should be just fine to use, like, to install the images on a Raspberry Pi for Big Screen, and it just works. For Plasma Mobile, a little bit the same. There's a little bit more people working on Plasma Mobile than for Big Screen. So, I mean, that I think it shows. You have several images. You have Manjaro there. You have also Postmarket OS that they are pushing some installations for your devices, mainly the PinePhone, which is what is going to like make your life easier. The rest of devices are a little bit less supported, but yeah, it depends a little bit. Getting better, when is gonna get better? They're both community projects, and you can help. You can find people who can help. If you have some problems, if anyone has a problem, feel free to report them, and we will do our best.
One more short question from back here.
Hey, first, thanks for everything, doing KDE and Plasma. It's really, really great to use. So, kinda in the same vein, and the first question, like, in 10 years, where do you see KDE, Plasma, apps? Is there some big vision for the future, or is it mostly incremental improvements, like next version of Qt, extra?
I don't think it's up to me to like have big UX changes for the future. Like, humanity is gonna tell us. It also depends a lot on the hardware. For example, like if we look 10 years back, like saying you're gonna have a big screen and a mobile version would have felt a little bit science fiction. Maybe 10 years, not 20 years, okay? I think that the important part that we need to figure out, and it's just not KDE, but like all of us collectively, is how we can make sure that people can do this for a living, how we don't need to be like, well, struggling poor people to have who has this free software vision, but instead we can, well, just develop it and people supporting their work. I think that this is the next big thing that is going to help us put forward the experience that we're after. We can see for like the case of the Steamdeck, for example, where there is a good business case on the product and where we can be part of the development, that we then have the resources to develop our free software projects for everyone to benefit, not just the one product. So yeah.
This is somewhat of a loaded question, but so speaking of communities, in the last few years, with unification of Flatpak efforts and Snap and co-hosting conferences between GNOME and KDE, and portals kind of unifying an API and trying to work more in the free desktop space instead of having custom APIs just for KDE, just for GNOME, we're kind of trying to bring it all together to create the free desktop dark mode, free desktop accent colors, and things like that. Do you see are we getting healthier, like as a global community? Like the hard division between KDE and GNOME seems to still there, but I mean, I think from my perspective, things are better. What's your perspective on that?
I mean, I'm certainly more involved today than I was years ago. I am proud and happy that we're doing this. I have been working with several GNOME people on working on Wayland protocols and portals as well. And I don't have big complaints. We could be discussing about details, but I feel like they're details. Yeah, I think we're healthier. We're not very organized. Maybe that would be the big problem, right? Or we're organized through Git, which is something that happens, but I think that it's a fine problem to have. I think we were worse for sure, yes.
All right, that just about wraps it up. Thank you, Aleix. Let's give him a hand.